Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at the YOGTZE code. Honestly, it's a case that's as fascinating as it is deeply, deeply unsettling. We're going to break down the evidence step by step to see how a seemingly normal, everyday situation completely spiraled into one of Germany's strangest unsolved mysteries, a puzzle that continues to absolutely baffle investigators decades later.
I want you to picture this exact sequence of events, because the premise of this case is almost cinematic in how strange it is. Just imagine it. A man is sitting in his home. Out of nowhere, he grabs a piece of paper and writes down 6 specific letters. And then, the very second he finishes writing them, he violently crosses them out. And just a few hours after this completely bizarre act, he's found dead. The circumstances surrounding his death defy all forensics, all logic, and really all reason. And it all centers around one haunting, enduring question. What does YOGTZE mean? Is it a name? Is it some sort of acronym? A license plate? Or just a pure delusion? Okay, let's dive into this. To truly understand the gravity of that question and just how entirely bizarre this mystery is, we really need to map out the exact sequence of events. We've got to track his final frantic hours.
Section 1. Descent into paranoia. A sudden panic.
Now, tracking this timeline, you can clearly see the suspense escalating with literally every passing hour. In the evening, the man experiences this sudden, severe descent into paranoia. He becomes absolutely convinced that people are out to get him. As night falls, this intense anxiety actually physically drives him from the safety of his house. He starts engaging in this frantic, aimless driving. At one point, he makes a brief, really strange visit to a local pub. He orders a beer, but get this, before he can even take a single sip, he collapses to the floor, physically trembling. And no, he hasn't been drinking at all. It's purely a physical manifestation of whatever sheer terror he's experiencing. He eventually goes back home, but his relief is super short-lived. Because in the very early morning hours, he abruptly leaves his home for the absolute last time.
Section 2. The YOGTZE note, a cryptic clue. And that brings us to the most perplexing piece of physical evidence in the entire case. And it all originates with a massive psychological break. According to accounts from that evening, he was just sitting quietly with his wife when he suddenly jolted upright and yelled out, "I've got it!" It was like a giant light bulb had suddenly switched on in the dark, right? Or like some long-standing tormenting puzzle had instantly resolved in his mind.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the immediate, jarring contradiction in his actions. Right after shouting that he's figured it out, he scribbles the word YOGTZE, Y-O-G-T-Z-E. But he doesn't leave it for anyone to read. Nope. He immediately crosses out those exact 6 letters. Think about that for a second. Why document your huge breakthrough if you're just going to instantly destroy it? The fact that he crossed it out suggests he either realized the code was wrong the moment he wrote it, or, much more chillingly, he realized it was incredibly dangerous to leave it visible.
Section 3. The highway crash. Bizarre findings.
So, the wreckage of his car was eventually discovered off the side of the Autobahn, but the autopsy findings presented investigators with a totally impossible puzzle. Look at these points here. First off, he was found completely naked in the vehicle. Second, the forensic team determined that his severe, ultimately fatal injuries were actually sustained before the crash even happened. Let that sink in for a second. He was already fatally injured before the car wrecked. And finally, the absolute most baffling detail of all, he was found placed in the passenger seat of his own car. This undeniably means someone else had to have been driving. The crash wasn't the cause of death, it was just a stage.
Section 4. Strange witnesses and bizarre calls.
As the formal investigation kicked off, authorities naturally hoped to find some clarity from anyone who might have been in the area. But instead, the logic completely fell apart. Investigators gathered these incredibly bizarre witness accounts from the highway crash site. Truck drivers passing by in the darkness reported seeing strange figures, but they weren't just standing around. Witnesses specifically described seeing men lingering near the wrecked vehicle, looking directly into the car, and then simply walking away without offering any help at all. Instead of helping identify a suspect or explaining the mechanics of the crash, these accounts only deepened the puzzle. The mystery grew so much darker, and the investigation suddenly found itself just chasing shadows.
And to make matters worse, there were mysterious phone calls surrounding the case that utterly defy logical explanation. And this brilliantly illustrates just how deep the paranoia ran, not just for him, but in the entire atmosphere of the investigation. For instance, there were reports of a contextless late-night call to his family where no words were spoken. Nothing. Just deep breathing on the other end before a sudden hang-up. These weren't standard communications. They were bizarre, fragmented interactions that layered even more confusion onto a timeline that was already bleeding into total chaos.
Section 5. Competing theories. Madness or murder.
Well, when physical evidence fails to tell a coherent story, investigators are basically forced to rely on theories. So the crucial point is that we have to impartially balance two wildly different, dominating theories here. Theory 1 points to a massive psychological collapse, basically a severe psychotic break resulting in a tragic, highly bizarre accident. Now, this neatly explains the sudden paranoia, the frantic, aimless driving, and the seemingly meaningless YOGTZE note. But it completely fails to explain the forensics. I mean, why was he naked? And who placed his pre-injured body in the passenger seat? On the flip side, we have Theory 2, a targeted murder and an elaborate cover-up. Now, this perfectly explains the physical evidence at the crash site and those strange figures seen by witnesses peering into the wreckage. However, it struggles immensely to justify his own deeply strange, paranoid behavior in the hours leading up to that night. The crazy thing is, neither theory perfectly fits the bizarre evidence we just reviewed.
Which brings us right to the end of our explainer, sitting basically right back in the suspenseful atmosphere where we started. Decades later, the whole shebang remains entirely unsolved. We're forced to look at the scattered pieces of this puzzle and ask ourselves, was it madness? Was it a calculated, brutal murder? Or, was it something else entirely that we simply lack the context to understand? The timeline is fractured, the witness accounts are ghostly, and the physical evidence literally contradicts itself. But the most chilling detail of all still sits on that piece of crossed-out paper from his living room. Based on the evidence, which theory do you lean toward? And ultimately, what does YOGTZE mean? Thank you for exploring this totally fascinating case with me, and I'll leave you to think on that.